Hello, I'm Eric Schmid, a shareholder in Elliott Davis's manufacturing and distribution practice. We're continuing today with our multi-part consulting video series, which we've titled An Operational Discussion. And today we're tackling the topic of IT strategy. As you can see on the slide here, the 5 videos that we've covered to date do tackle some pretty meaty topics. So if there's anything on that list that is pertinent to what you're dealing with in your business right now, we encourage you to take a look and listen. And after today, the next 2 installments are supply chain and strategic planning. So with that, IT strategy, I'm joined today by 3 of my colleagues, Jimmy Buddenberg, Denise Bailey, and Tom Yuva. Each has a wealth of IT experience in different settings. And so I'm going to turn over to Jimmy. Jimmy's going to kind of help with the discussion leader role, kind of moderator role today. So Jimmy, introduce yourself, maybe a bit about the practice, and then hand over to the other folks and we'll get going.
Yeah, no, thanks, Eric. I appreciate it. And yeah, so Jimmy Buddenberg, I'm the practice leader for our IT risk and cybersecurity group. I've been in IT for 25 years, providing services for a number of industries, including manufacturing and distribution, serving organizations as small as $1 million in revenue up to 10 billion in revenue. So pretty wide range there. And our group really enjoys serving customers in the IT space. We believe that all companies are becoming technology companies to some degree and are on that spectrum. And so we really try to help organizations navigate where they should be and help bring valuable solutions to them in also a secure way. And I mentioned our cybersecurity practice as well, which means that we help bring those solutions in a secure way and helping to meet any kind of regulatory compliance that may apply to your industry as well. And so happy to be here. Tom?
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks for joining. My name is Tom Yuva. I'm the practice leader for our management consulting services group here at the firm. Similar to Jimmy, have over 25 years of industry experience, both in IT as well as operations, and blending those 2 things together. And really in MCS, our practice is really focused on trying to take strategy and how we drive that down to implementation. So part of what we'll cover today is making sure that we kind of understand, hey, what does good pieces of strategy look like? What types of problems do we need to solve? And more importantly, how do we drive that through and actually realize the benefit of those things?
Denise?
I'm Denise Bailey. I lead our business systems consulting practice here at the firm. I have about 15 years experience in this space, and we help our clients with their system selection process, with process improvements around that. Specifically in the ERP space, we work with our clients a lot. What we have found is, 10 years ago, a lot of companies weren't thinking about this. They may be doing things manually or in some other form, but now with the way that businesses are moving and the need for technology and for efficiency and for being able to communicate with their vendors and customers, it's even more important than ever.
Great. So as I mentioned, Jimmy's going to kind of be our discussion leader today. Jimmy, you want to get us kicked off with the content?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let's jump right in. And if I were, so the topic is IT strategy, but if I were the business owner or the C-suite leader of an organization, I'd hear IT strategy and then I think, oh, that's all great. That's something I'd love to get to, but I've got decisions that are facing me right now. I've got decisions I need to make tomorrow, next week, next month. Some of those decisions are, my IT director is proposing that we need to spend $250,000 to upgrade our network infrastructure, or it's going to fall apart and I can't run my business, right? I know a lot of organizations are moving their applications and infrastructure to the cloud. What is the cloud and what are the benefits of moving there? Office 365, we all need email. I've got all this on-prem infrastructure, email servers. Should I move it to Office 365? Am I going to save money by doing that? Or am I going to see some operational benefit from that? Cyber attacks, am I at a real risk of a cyber attack? How do I know? And should I do something about it? Denise mentioned ERP systems, and organizations are growing. So have they outgrown their systems? Do I need to consider other systems? And all that, relies around having a good IT team. And so, a common question that we get is my IT staff keeping up with the pace of technology? I've got a great team, very responsive. They serve us well. They understand the business, but are they keeping up with all the changes and the opportunities in technology that we can be taking advantage of? And that even leads to another question: should I outsource IT? Should I be in this business of providing IT support and doing that internally versus outsourcing that? And then finally, you've got people bringing in their own devices. They want to connect them to my network. It's called BYOD, bring your own device. Is that something that I should support? Yes or no? Is it secure? And so just a number of decisions. And we're going to hit on a number of those topics in our discussion, but I do want to take us back to the idea of an IT strategy. And if I'm the skeptic, Tom, and I'll ask you this question, I'm thinking, hey, that's going to take time, right? We're going to go off site. We're going to burn some incense and, do what we need to do and do all this strategy stuff. At the end of the day, really, what is the benefit? What are we getting out of an IT strategy?
Gotcha. Great question. And Jimmy, you covered a whole litany of things that I know that we'll get into. And the reality is that's a relatively small list out of a larger universe of topics that companies struggle with. So to the point of this overall strategy, why do we need it? The very short answer is it is not about getting the newest and coolest stuff in. It's not about having the greatest technology in place. It's all about maximizing profitability of the business. That's the business case, right? So there's a lot of ways we can attack many of the problems or all of the problems, Jimmy, that you addressed. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to this is where we think we need to be, 3 years out to support the business. And whether they're people investments, non-labor investments, system investments, we shouldn't be making any of those unless we know that there's going to be some tangible benefit on that P&L that we can see, right? So at the end of the day, the strategy should support, drive, and enable increased profitability.
How much? So tell me how much. Let's put some percentages to it. Are we talking 5%, 10%, 20%? What's
all right? So I get that question all the time, right? And in the absence of being clairvoyant, one of the, as we were getting ready for this session, one of the examples I think that came up that was a good one was if somebody says, okay, we're going to take a trip to Florida, how long is it going to take me to get there? Okay, well, I can't answer that. Where are you starting from? Are you in Maryland? Are you in Texas? Are you in South Carolina? So there's really two key things that we need to understand, or company needs to understand is, A, where is it that we're going to head and where are we starting from? Now, what I would say is for the folks that have not been through this drill before or have not attempted this, you typically see disproportionate benefit the very first or second time you go through it, as opposed to smaller benefits later on.
All right. So I think I heard somewhere between 10 and 20% from you, Tom. So we'll peg that number on you and hold you to that. I totally get, that it is a range and it really depends on your maturity and where you're starting from and where you're going to. So, but at the end of the day, what you're saying is this isn't strategy for strategy's sake. This isn't just an exercise that is helpful so that you're making good decisions, which you are. But at the end of the day, you are driving and maximizing profitability for your organization, whether it's top line revenue generation or to enable your business, or it's looking at your expense reduction to impact the bottom line. So let's get practical. So I want to hear some examples. So as part of an IT strategy, what's one thing that you've seen that in terms of maximizing profitability that you've seen to be able to do that in the technology space?
Yeah, so one of the more advanced capabilities we see in strategies, which are dependent on having some other foundational things in place, but that's okay. But one of those capabilities is around predictive analytics, right? So in the M&D world, anybody that's dealing with distribution, here's a couple of things we've seen where you can have some very tangible benefits. So think about the scenario where you have a distribution center, right? Whatever the size, 200,000 square feet, 500,000 square feet, million square feet, 4 stories high, a lot of bins. how do we optimize bin location of products, right? And that's with a combination of different inputs. It can be demand, it can be desired inventory levels, it could be lead times for certain type of products. But predictive analytics can help distribution centers analyze where those bins should be, how much they should have in them, right, which impacts working capital, things of that nature. So imagine a scenario where, the average pick takes 50 seconds, right? Well, if you can reconfigure things and optimize so that that pick now takes 25 or 30 seconds as a percent of reduction, think about what you just did, right?
Yeah.
In terms of either having more throughput for the same amount of effort, or being able to make other cost reduction changes or things like that. So it really is an enabler, and that's simply one example.
Yeah, no, and that reminds me, predictive analytics, predictive failures is another good example for manufacturing. An organization that we served, a customer was a very large theme park. Let's just say it was a theme park, pretty global organization. They had rides, and one was a water ride. And I tell you what, that water ride, anytime you get mechanics and water together, you know what happens. And so there was hundreds, if not thousands, of sensors on this ride, and because of the water, the ride was down all the time. I mean, there was some sensor that had failed, and so we implemented some predictive analytics around being able to identify when those sensors were going to fail in advance, and that allowed that organization to do maintenance during the night, so that they could replace those sensors before they failed. And the customer experience had, increased, tremendously, because the ride was up all the time versus, it wasn't down. So that, yeah, it reminded me of that kind of use case that I had seen. So Denise, why don't you give us an example of how technology is going to maximize and improve the bottom line?
Yeah, so one of those areas is, and we hear a lot about this from companies, should I move to the cloud or not? Should I keep all of my, all of my equipment on-prem? Should I move to the cloud? What should I do? Is it going to cost me more? What we've actually found and studies show is usually about 80% of the companies who move to the cloud realize savings of some sort. Sometimes it's anywhere from 30 to 50% overall savings by moving their infrastructure to the cloud. Now, sometimes you may need to do a hybrid of that. There may be a reason because you have certain applications that you do need to keep on-prem, or maybe you have a strategy that long-term you're going to be fully in the cloud, but maybe not right away. So those are all things that we need to consider. And I know when you're doing that, it's a good time to take inventory of your current applications you have. And one way to save there is to see how many users do I have? Am I using the modules we're currently even have purchased? Do we have applications that we're paying for that we're not fully utilizing? I know one example, we were working with a company, and when we went in to talk with them, they were thinking they had 4 to 5 major systems they were using. And we discovered there was about 75 different applications that they were paying for each month, and they didn't even realize it. Some of this can be happening on your employees' expense reports. There's a few dollars here and a few dollars there, and suddenly, it's increased your budget and you didn't even realize. So those are just some areas that we have seen that are really, it is very much worth your time to explore as you're going forward.
Yeah, and the whole idea, especially for organizations that have cycles in terms of seasonality in their business, where distribution is higher. I'm thinking of a large distribution company I served in during busy season around Christmas and right after. If you have to build an infrastructure and manage that for your peak seasons, that means that outside of peak, it's sitting there with idle capacity. You've got storage, you've got compute, you've got network, you've got all this infrastructure that you've paid for that's not being used, right? And so the cloud is elastic and allows you to scale up and scale down dynamically, right? And so that allows you to really just pay for what you're using at the time, and so you don't have a lot of stranded capacity. So
exactly.
So that's real good. So, hey, Tom, just another quick one on, for maximizing profits. Another example you have?
Yeah, so I think kind of big picture, and I would like to piggyback on something Denise said that I think is really relevant for this section. So if you just think about, the OpEx spend typically that a company might make for technology, usually operations and technology are some of the bigger buckets, around there. So if you think about it in terms of both labor and non-labor, one of the things that strategy enables is something as simple as standardization, right? So having a smaller number of either platforms or systems or specific skills that are necessary can reduce the number of subsequent people that are needed to be able to support those environments. So when you have a large number of more disparate types of environments, like the example you gave, Denise, I think was perfect, right? Hey, we think we've got 6 or 7. I've got 75. Right. And that's not uncommon. These things kind of grow up over time and they kind of emerge. Well, it takes people to support those. So by having a very focused strategy around how do we consolidate to the degree that makes sense and be able to capture those benefits, that's one thing. And then same on the non-labor side. In that same example, all those systems typically have some degree of maintenance. They have some degree of upkeep. So just by being able to say, here's where that target is, 3 years out or whatever it might be to support the business, is let's make sure that we're taking every dollar of SG&A and applying it in the best way possible, because dollar for dollar, everything that we save there drops right down to profitability.
Yeah, I've seen that in a lot of organizations' mission statements: standardize and simplify. I mean, I think that's really what you're saying, is the more you can standardize and simplify your technology stack and your application stack, it's going to reduce the amount of cost to support that, whether it's people or software licenses or those sort of things. So yeah, well said, Tom. So great examples, I think, that are real for how we can drive cost savings to the bottom line. There's a ton more that we'd love to talk more about, but I do want to shift a little bit and start talking about strategy itself and what does a good strategy look like. And so Tom, can you tell us a little bit about the link between the technology strategy and the business plan? Is it I can say, is it important to have those aligned? Obviously, you know the answer to that. So why don't you tell us why it's important, right?
Right. So, and I'm going to dovetail from some of the conversation that we just had, right? Having that technology strategy is great, but if it doesn't support and align what the business needs to accomplish, again, so that we can realize that and maximize that profitability, then, we're just not getting home, right? We're not getting the job done. So, typically what we'll see is somebody saying, hey, you know what, we've got to make a lot of investments over the next, 12 months, 24 months, et cetera. How do we go about doing that? The risk of not linking that technology strategy to the business plan, and notice the batting order there. We're linking technology to business, not the other way around, right? We see people get this wrong all the time, right? Start with the business. So we have a session that's coming up in the series in a couple of weeks around the business, the larger business strategy. So think about the technology strategy as one chapter of that playbook, right? So the technology strategy should support the business in very meaningful ways. And there's a lot of details of how you go about doing that. But really what we're doing is trying to reduce the risk of making bad choices, poor investments from a technology perspective, and maximizing the opportunity and probability of satisfying the capabilities of the business, right? That's kind of it in a nutshell.
And Tom, I really like how you also take it from a strategy and break it down to make it real, so it doesn't become shelfware, right? And that's the worst thing that could happen, is you spend time developing it, it sits on a shelf, but you then take the opportunity to operationalize it into quarterly and monthly priorities. Why don't you just kind of lastly, as we wrap up, just talk about the components of a technology strategy. So I know different people look at the world a little differently. So how do you look at the world from a technology perspective?
No, certainly. I think we've got a nice graphic kind of to flow along here. And when we look at exemplar companies, right, people that do this stuff really, really well, they have common characteristics and common themes around what these things look like. And we get questions all the time. Hey, what does one of these things even look like? What should it have in it, right? So, we're suggesting there's basically 6 building blocks. The first one is around, and this has come up, Denise mentioned it, Jimmy, you mentioned it, around applications. That's one thing that's a lot front and center to what a lot of people see within the business, whether it's ERP or anything else. The next piece has to deal with data and the management of that data. So data and applications are very closely related, but the data within the company, that's where a lot of the gold is, right? In terms of understanding whether it's about customers, product, inventory, financials, et cetera. The next one we have is around, Jimmy, I know this is near and dear to your heart, information protection, right? So whether it's security on a number of different fronts, right? It could be systems, it could be networks, it could be policies and procedures, it could be training around people and all those types of things, but it's securing and protecting the information assets of the business. The next one really is around network and infrastructure. So the topic of cloud has come up. So whether you decide to move to the cloud, whether you decide to keep it on-prem, whether you decide it's a hybrid, that domain or that area of network and infrastructure somehow has to be addressed. So going to the cloud is a technology strategy. Having a hybrid approach, that is also a technology strategy, but it's within that network or within that domain of network and infrastructure. We have another one that we call run as a business that we don't see a lot, but once people hear about it, they're like, yeah, why didn't I think of this before? So running IT, just like any other business, right? Financials, budgeting, contract management, training and development, staffing optimization, all of those types of things that go into having a well-run IT function. And then lastly, what we call workplace computing. So think about that as anything this side of the wall jack or access point, from mobile devices to tablets to workstations to printers, any of those types of things, barcode scanners out on the production floor. Jimmy, you mentioned sensors. All of those types of things fall in there. So really within those 6 components, we want to make sure that there's definition around those things and that they tie together and support each other, not just from a technology point of view, but ultimately they need to tie back to the business.
Yeah. And I couldn't help but think, I really like how you broke that down, Tom, and it really helps to put things in perspective. And really, I couldn't help but think how things have changed with COVID and how organizations have changed how they do business, whether it's remote worker or their customers are in different profiles, and how it really makes sense to kind of revisit a technology strategy. So thanks for that. And, we would just welcome the opportunity to help, organizations walk through this and to do that with a number of services that we can provide that I won't get into, Eric. I know we're running short on time, so I'm going to go ahead and just turn it back to you to wrap us up. So thanks, guys.
Yeah, Jimmy, Tom, Denise, great discussion. I've had an easy job here, just kind of sitting back and listening to the dialogue. What I'm very aware of, though, is that we're only scratching the surface in terms of our capabilities. Kind of a small package, about 20 minutes. But appreciate all of our viewers and our listeners. You can find this content and a bunch more on our website. And with that, I'll say thank you.